Relief came the way of President Bola Tinubu yesterday following the ruling of Nancy Maldonado, a senior judge of the United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois, halting the release of his university records to candidates of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, in the February 25 presidential election, Atiku Abubakar. The order staying the execution of Magistrate Jeffrey Gilbert on the Chicago State University was sequel to Tinubu's plea that releasing the said documents to Atiku would cause him severe and irreparable harm. Gilbert had, in a ruling on Tuesday night, ordered the Chicago State University to, within 48 hours, release the academic records of Tinubu to Atiku to enable him prove his claim that Tinubu ought not to have contested the February 25 presidential election on account of alleged perjury and forgery of his CSU certificate. The judge, in issuing the order, held that the applicant, a former vice president of Nigeria, had shown sufficient reasons why Tinubu's academic records should be released to him. The court also ordered the school's administrators to authenticate any documents submitted under oath. Tinubu had, in a fresh emergency application, specifically asked the district court to delay the enforcement of the order of Judge Gilbert till Monday, September 25, 2023. He claimed Atiku would not be prejudiced against if the court delayed the release of the said documents, as he still has up to September 27 to submit materials in support of his appeal at the Supreme Court. All right, so we spoke about this yesterday, and this is an update. The court had Judge Jeffrey Gilbert had given the school, CSU, 48 hours to release documents, and now there's a stay on that. We're fine.
So, I mean, I'm just trying to understand how the university records of somebody that is in public office being released will cause irreparable harm. I mean, because I don't get that line. How will it cause irreparable harm? This is a public figure, a president of a country. If you're a private citizen, nobody has got qualms with that. But you're the president of a country. You went to the people, you said, vote for me. You got voted in. And now there are cases as regards your documents in school. What's the big deal in releasing it to the people? How does it cause a harm or irreparable harm? That's a conundrum I don't understand. But the case has been on for quite a while. And I think the appeal will go out there, I think Monday or thereabout. You know, you're going to have more hearings and more submissions as regards the case. But the truth has to be said, once somebody becomes a public figure, most importantly, holding a public position, definitely you should be open to public scrutiny. And releasing your university records for the sake of, authenticating things should not be a big deal, in my own estimation. And that's why the line of irreparable harm is something I don't understand. The school has claimed he went there. So why can't they release the document? Or why doesn't he want them to release the document? To authenticate the claim of the school. Pure and simple. The school, still reporting through the CBS channel, claimed he attended the school in the late 70s. So what's the qualm about releasing? So how will releasing the document of a school that was attended cause irreparable harm? That's a big question. I don't understand.
Well, I thought Justice Maldonado said severe harm, not that, it could cause irreparable harm. But okay, it's a question of semantics. But two things. Yes, I share the view that anybody that is in the public space should be available to public scrutiny. Because when you hold a position on behalf of the people, there will be questions about transparency and accountability, and even about, your own personal integrity. And the principle here is volatile non-fit injuria. If you don't like heat, don't go near the kitchen. But here, we're not dealing with that morality. We're dealing with two sides of it. The first side of it is that Atiku Abubakar and the PDP, they're saying that there were discrepancies in the academic records of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And what Atiku is trying to establish, his lawyers say they just want clarification. because their claim is that he presented forged certificates and that this could have material implications for their own case in the Nigerian presidential election petition process. So they've now gone to the US, and the school, Chicago State University, was subpoenaed, and the request was an order of mandamus for discovery, for use. Okay, that's the emphasis. And the magistrate, that's Judge Gilbert, having said, well, the court has jurisdiction to inquire into the matter, well, gave that order, which, was effective by about 3 p.m. yesterday, I think, Chicago time. But then, Tinubu's counsel went straight to the district court, where the judge now said, okay, we'll give you till Monday for you. And two things could happen. Either the judge will uphold the decision of the magistrate, or the lawyers will be asked to file their briefs afresh. And then the whole argument will continue. So if you look at it from that perspective, yes, the Tinubu team, they probably will not want the president to be embarrassed by any kind of clarification, which may then go into the public domain. But where the matter is that Chicago State University has already confirmed that he attended the university, and they had issued a statement before now to that effect. So the question I raised yesterday was, okay, this discovery for use, okay, what are they going to discover? And I was saying people should not speculate. Let the discovery be made first, and then it comes into the public domain. Then when the discovery comes into the public domain, because it's a civil matter, it's not as if it's a criminal matter. So the question is, in international civil litigation, can a foreign forum impact on a local forum? That is a question. Okay. Two, one of the points we made yesterday was that the Supreme Court of Nigeria, which is now going to hear the appeal, is not a court where you go and bring evidence. It's a court of public policy. It's not a court of evidence. But I also said there may be exceptional circumstances under which fresh evidence may be accepted. Exceptional circumstances. And it's only in the wisdom of the Supreme Court that will even be allowed. So nobody should speculate. Because one, you have to prove that there will be a miscarriage of justice if their lordships do not take a look at that fresh evidence. They will have to consider the weight of the evidence. They will have to consider the relevance of the evidence. They will have to consider whether the evidence is admissible. So these are all the weighty issues that lie ahead. So it's not as if it's an automatic thing. But, it's possible to just say, okay, as Rufai has pointed out, what is the big deal? About certificate. If you say you have it, just put it on the table. If they say discovery for use, okay, let's see the discovery. But there are many sides to it, and that was why I was saying yesterday that at the end of the day, it may be of no moment, because the decision in terms of relevance, weight, admissibility, will still be considered by Nigeria, not what, a foreign court dictates or tells Nigeria to do. No. So people should just know that the matter, is not something to really get excited about for now. Let us all wait for that discovery, if it happens. Okay?
Yes.
That, I think, is the issue.
All right. Well, that's very true in terms of waiting for the discovery. What we can talk about is just what's happening as the drama, as it is in this case, unfolds, just to find out. Of course, a few curious things, as Rufai already highlighted, that if the university has stated categorically that the president did attend Chicago State University in 1979, a certificate was issued to him, then it shouldn't be a problem. I think what makes it more curious is the attempt, and very determined attempt, of the president's lawyers and camp to stop the release of his certificate. And so you want to understand the reason why this is the case, why they are adamant that they shouldn't, that the CSU shouldn't release the certificate of the president, which he, authentically obtained in 1979. These are the questions that we begin to ask. And of course, the revelation. So perhaps from their camp, let his certificate be out there. Let's put an end to what is now becoming a national embarrassment, whereby the U.S. is deliberating, our U.S. court is deliberating whether to release the certificate of the president of a sovereign nation who was elected. I mean, it's really, aside from the, the election side of things and the morality of things, it's the huge embarrassment it's causing to our nation, whereby we are contending as to whether the president submitted a certificate or attended an institution in a United States college. It's really quite embarrassing, to say the least. And so we hope that this will be put to rest. And it's very simple. CSU released the certificate. Let Nigerians or Mr. Atiku Abubakar be able to cite what has already been established by the university and on media platforms like CBS. Let it be established and let this matter be put to rest, and the president continue with the business of governance. He has already been established as president at the petitions court, first leg of the petitions court, and now the Labour Party and Mr. Peter Obi and Mr. Atiku Abubakar and the PDP are challenging the outcome of that. So if, and from the status of the president, this is what happened, he went to the university, it should be a very simple matter, in quote. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of harm it would cause if, they're allowed to release these results. So from my view, it's just the national embarrassment it's causing to the nation, the fact that, the exalted and elevated position of president is now put under scrutiny by a judge abroad, and we're arguing about certificates. And, it's just really embarrassing. Let's end this matter and move on. So let's see whether, if he indeed did not perjure, then let him release his certificate. But what was also very critical to this is that in the event that a certificate that wasn't, that he lied about his certificate, then the Constitution is clear about the fact that he cannot be elected as president if he presented false documents as part of his, his qualifications to being president. That is very clear. And so that's why it is important to find out and get to the bottom of this matter, not just for the benefit of the parties involved in terms of the opposition party, but the benefit of Nigeria and the integrity of the seat of the president. Very important. Move on to the next story. Tinubu has met with the UN Secretary, Antonio Guterres. He said African nations will no longer tolerate human rights advocacy being used to hinder their efforts to combat illicit resource smuggling and violence. Tinubu also called for the UN to transform into an action coordination center, emphasizing the need to redirect resources to address real challenges promptly. He highlighted Nigeria's potential, vowed to fight poverty, and expressed readiness for necessary decisions. On his part, Guterres acknowledged UN reform efforts to empower the developing world and assured support for ECOWAS amid recent coups in West Africa. Now, this is ongoing reports from the United Nations General Assembly and conversations with the UN Secretary General. Rufai.
I mean, yeah, a lot of meetings had at the UN, and on the sidelines of this, he had a meeting with Antonio Guterres. They talked extensively, meeting Antonio Guterres, talking about the fact that, yes, we'll not have a continent where coups persist any longer, which is wrong. In recent times, we've had too many coups on the African continent, from Niger to Gabon. And in fact, I think there was a report done recently that said that there's a circle of coup that people are predicting around, the Congo region. And there are rumors about that, and people straight off the bat are thinking about Denis Sassou Nguesso, when there was a rumor recently, but anyway, that's been dispelled. But people are asking, why should African leaders even sit tight in power? Why do they have that high level of hypocrisy? Look at Paul Kagame we were talking about the other day, that wants to go on and do another term, which is quite very sad, and it's been there for a while. Even look at Denis Sassou Nguesso, that got there on the back of a civil war. I finally got power and has been there for so many years. In fact, the last election he won, there was a big campaign against him saying, Sasufi, that means go. It's time for you to leave, and things like that. And increasingly, we're having more leaders like that on the African continent. Look at Theodore Obiang, look at Gnassingbé Eyadema, and the likes. So a country like Togo, for instance, it's just maybe only 2 or 3 families that have, ruled Togo. Maybe the Sivio Olympio family and then the Gnassingbé Eyadema family. And that has continued. And also human rights abuse across the African continent. He also talked about that. And, he spoke very strongly, to the UN SecGen. Another thing that he also talked about is about the fact that he's ready to go ahead with policies, even if they make him unpopular. The truth has to be said. Nobody's saying the president should not go ahead with policies, even if they make them unpopular, because people can think through them. But the most important thing, he should think before he makes those policies. Because the problem has constantly been lack of critical thinking as regards to policy. I'll give you two policies. Inauguration day, he said subsidy gone. Subsidy gone was announced by him even failing to listen to his advisor that said, don't make any big pronouncements on subsidy. And you can see where that led us. Today, subsidy is back. See the FAC reports. NLNG remitted over $200 million. NNPC used part of that, paid subsidy. So we are back to square one. Look at the currency convergence. Today, it's 995. Maybe before the end of trading, they might hit 1,000 to the US dollars. Now, the finance minister is coming out to say, it's because we have a backlog of 6.8 billion. You didn't know that before you decided to float and you had nothing to defend? Because if you want to even have a managed float like we claim we're having, you must still have an arsenal to be able to intervene in the market. So these are ill-thought-through policies that are constantly bedeviling people vis-a-vis the massive inflation rate in the country. But in all of this, I see hope and prospect for this country, because I know this country, the only problem, the only last leg for Nigeria to be able to actualize the abundance and the glory God has given, this country has glory.
Yes, it does.
This country has glory. The only last leg is leadership. Once we get leadership right, I believe Nigeria can be a superpower. I'm not even just saying an African power, a superpower. So our leaders should be circumspect. They should do what we call scenario planning. And let's help build this country. This country has glory.
All right, glorious nation.
Okay, well, President Tinubu consistently has been functioning as the chief salesman of Nigeria on the foreign policy front. And that was essentially what he had done during this trip, as he had done during other trips, either on the platform of ECOWAS or at the France-Africa Summit or at the G20 in New Delhi. And what he did, simply, is to remind the UN Secretary General about the importance of Nigeria to the world. This is not the first time he's saying that since he assumed office. And how there is an urgent need to fight poverty. He even reminded the UN Secretary General that he himself had experienced poverty. But now, the whole world must come together, cooperate, form a solidarity front to address the challenge of poverty, which is affecting the rest of the world, and which was in line in his UN General Assembly. For the most part, he used his meeting with the UN Secretary General to reiterate some of the highlights of that, UN General Assembly speech. One, poverty, which I have pointed out. Two, the importance of Nigeria. Three, illegal exploitation of Africa, whereby the people of Africa are impoverished for the benefit of Western nations, and the need for the UN to assist in that regard. And not to support all these arguments about human rights for extremists who come and steal from Africa, and then they cannot be punished because the question is raised about human rights defense for criminals. So I think that was also a very important point that he made. He talked about security and counter-terrorism. So all those highlights that were in his UN General Assembly speech, he more or less put them before the UN Secretary General. The only new thing, I think, that he brought up was about the need to transform the UN. That was what was reported. He talked about transforming the UN. Well, the technical word is the reform of the UN, and the UN Secretary General used the right phrase when he said, well, efforts are ongoing to reform the UN. But drawing attention to that, we also resonate with the international community, because since the UN was formed, and over the years, more members, got involved, and also the axis of power around the world expanded. And there have been concerns, for example, about the administration of the United Nations. Two, about representation. As far back as even before 2004, a group called Uniting for Consensus came together. These other countries that have emerged, Brazil, Japan, a group called the G4 countries. And then from Africa, you also have a group saying Africa must be represented. And then in 2004, Kofi Annan, U.S. Secretary General, as he then was, set up a team of advisors to look into it. But of course, this has been very difficult to carry out that reform. First, the cost, and then would the permanent members of the Security Council allow that reform to take place? Look at this year's UN General Assembly. You know, some of the permanent members were not there, you know, giving an impression about, you know, the need, the more urgent need to really transform and, you know, reform the UN, make it more representative. But the big takeaway, you know, from that meeting with the UN Secretary General was the UN Secretary General, you know, promising President Tinubu that, look, on the issue of coups in Africa and West Africa, that the United Nations will back, you know, African leaders with the full weight of the UN system. Well, what that means, you can interpret it, whether the UN will come and put boots on the ground or not. But it was good rhetoric. I think it came across as a good meeting. And the president, you know, also, I think yesterday met with Nigerians in the US, where he told them, look, come back home. Before that, even his own wife had told them, come back home, let's build the country together. But, I mean, you know, that's not the immediate subject, but he has left the United States, we're told, going through Paris before coming to Nigeria. I think the president has a special love for France. Every time he either goes through France or, you know, he stops over somewhere.
Paris is so beautiful. See Paris and die.
Well, maybe he wants to see if he can catch up with the British monarch there before.
That's true.
Anyway, I'm just joking.
French kisses. Yeah.
Well, maybe he wants to give the First Lady a treat for her birthday. Remember?
Paris is the romance capital
of
the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love in Paris.
Love in Paris. I mean, we have a romantic
Tinubu.
president. His message to the First Lady yesterday was very...
You know this popular saying that even if mommy is 80 years old, she's still a darling.
Yeah.
With that
Did you see our monarch? Our monarch with mommy, your tummy.
Okay. All right, so I mean, away from that, it's been said with regards to the president's meeting with the UN Secretary General. I must say, though, that it seems like the president's outing to UNGA has been quite successful in terms of positioning, optics. One thing you cannot fault the president for is when he speaks, the authority, the daring nature, the challenge. And when you talk about a leader, especially on the African continent, you need leaders like that who can stand in the face of the West and talk tough. Something that has been consistent, and I think it's time for us to listen up, even beyond the West for Nigerians, is the fact that the president is saying that he's ready to defend our mines and stop illegal mining and stealing of our resources, especially by Western powers in collusion with Nigerian nationals. I think that's very clear. He said that during his speech when he addressed the assembly, and he said that in his meeting with the United States Secretary General. And in this statement, you would see veiled conversations around the fact that he knows that they're, they talk about human rights, they talk about let's defend, but it's a show of hypocrisy if they're doing that and yet stealing the resources of Africa. Not just Nigeria, but look at the African continent, look at the French, with neo-colonialism. Look at these challenges, and it's time for Africa to stand up and speak up. And this is what he consistently did, in New York. And I think that is commendable. We need a leader who is bold, who can speak, and who can talk tough, even, before on the international space. That would earn respect. And you would see when, the Secretary General had said at the end that they had high hopes for his presidency and were looking forward to supporting him, that Nigeria plays a huge role, not just in the sub-region, but on an international level. And I think that's the positioning we need. That's the kind of conversation and rhetoric we need. It's important, the kind of narrative we push. The West does a fine job coloring and making, when it comes to reporting and talking about their nation, to position themselves as a saint of the world. And yet we know the truth. It's not always the same. And so it's time for Africa to step up, because no one will tell our story. No one will defend us except ourselves. And I think that's something that presidents like President Tinubu, William Ruto have done, in terms of speaking at the United Nations. Very critical. Now, coming back home with regards to policies that may not be popular. Truth is that if you're going to be a great leader, there will be always occasions for making policies that will not be favorable or to be seen to be fair in the first instance, but ultimately, in the long term, would benefit the people. And this was perhaps the thinking of the president when the policies on fuel subsidy removal, because he showed guts. In fact, he was praised initially for that because a number of people said previous presidents have tried and failed several times to take that decisive step to remove subsidy. Even though it's been criticized in the past as being a cartel, a vehicle for high corruption, nothing had been done. So the president was praised in the first instance for taking and biting the bullet and doing what a number of people had not dared to do. However, the criticisms that followed in terms of poor policy plan and implementation. In fact, we haven't seen a full implementation because the palliatives or the efforts to cushion the effect of the removal of subsidy has not been fully, implemented. And now we're hearing again that they found out that perhaps it's not as easy as it is, and one way or the other, subsidy is still being paid. I don't think we should take away the good from that because of some, hiccups or stumbles along the way. We praise the boldness and the fearlessness of the president to make certain decisions. And we're looking forward to even more, especially with dealing with corruption, with, sorting out and cleaning out the civil service. It takes a lot of courage and it will be unpopular, especially for the elite in the first instance. But he must be bold to take these steps. And I hope that those are the steps he's talking about with regards to doing the things to sanitize and cleanse the civil service, to cleanse areas of corruption, NNPC, unbundling of certain parastatals, and then making it good for the benefit of Nigerians. Very important. We wish the president all the best. It's not just the United Nations Secretary General that is hoping and praying for the sake of Nigerians that he succeeds. We also pray and hope that in the future, there are lessons that will be learned from the initial hiccups from the first few days in office, and that he would go on to take those bold moves and continue to make those bold steps.